when you think of a hyperbolic plane, this is the picture you might think of. I just grabbed this off of Wikipedia. It's a very mathematical definition. It's a very small bit of the hyperbolic plane. And to me, this is kind of dry. It's not where the hyperbolic plane lives. So this summer, I just started making all sorts of visualizations so you can understand it better. This is actually the first picture on Wikipedia for hyperbolic plane. It's not very inspiring to me. But luckily, there have been some great improvements in hyperbolic plane visualizations recently. There have been some nice visual things in the past. This is just a regular tiling, right? This wasn't designed as art. This is just showing the concept of a regular tiling. But you might recognize this sort of Poincaré disc representation from Escher, who uses it to beautiful effect in his circle limit drawings. And then we've got these. This was the first, I have it right here actually, this is the first time that I saw like a real hyperbolic plane that you could move, you could see just purely the way it does not fit in Euclidean space. And this is the first like real representation that a lot of people saw. This is by Dana Femina, who also wrote a book about crocheting these hyperbolic planes. And I thought this was awesome. But I still didn't quite like get it. You can get a lot more intuition about what the hyperbolic plane is all about. But I still didn't like grok it, right? I had to do it myself. It started with balloons. I was working on balloons, computational balloon twisting. Yeah, so this is an octahedron. The first question, right, I was working on this with my co-authors, Eric and Martin Demeen. And the first question was, we have these balloons, we want to make some mathematical stuff. What can you make with one balloon? Anything with an Eulerian cycle or an Eulerian path should work. So this is the octahedron made out of one balloon. But the dodecahedron is going to take more than one balloon if you don't want to double any edges. In this case, it takes 10 balloons. This takes one balloon, one balloon, one balloon. Octahedron again, and the cube takes 4. And like, let's say we have an icosahedron. How many balloons am I going to need to make this? So we came up with a theory. It's not too difficult to explain, but I'm not going to delve into it too deeply. But basically, the number of odd vertices divided by 2 is going to be the number of balloons you need to make it. So we were working on this, and I got into making other things with balloons, because once you're making mathematical things with balloons, you kind of get carried away. So there's these regular polylinks, tangles. This is 6 pentagons out of balloons. And eventually I got around to remembering this guy, and I needed to make a hyperbolic plane out of balloons. Balloons are essentially lines, right? That's kind of the mathematical abstraction. So I began thinking about, okay, so you can make a plane. This is just a normal Euclidean plane. I'm tiling squares. The graph for this would be a square grid, because balloon models are all graphs, and that's kind of how we were approaching the problem of computational balloon twisting, was seeing the graph behind the balloon model. But what if this is my graph? Before, we had been so focused on mostly polyhedron, finite graphs. So now there was a question of how do you get, how many balloons I'm going to need when it's infinite, right? The most important thing is if I want to make this, I want to have some way to twist balloons into these different kind of tiles to all stick them together. And how many sections am I going to twist a balloon into? Even though this is infinite, I can still come up with how many sections to twist each balloon into if I want to be able to make this kind of most efficiently, right? If I use one balloon per edge, that's not efficient. I want to twist it into the most segments possible, but if I twisted it into too big a slice of this, I can't keep doing that and make this. But it turns out the answer is 7, so I made that. But then there's the other question is, what shape do I make and how do I tile it? And this is a question that I still don't know how to answer. In this case, I just have these pieces of the hyperbolic plane that kind of cover this much of it. So I have this kind of trapezoidal piece that's this shape, except I can't tile them together like this, like you would usually see trapezoids, because I'm not tiling the face of it, I'm tiling the edges. So how do you find a good way to do that, a symmetric way? I don't know for this one. Here's another picture of this guy. And it's fun because you can really see how it moves around, but the balloons kind of want to stay flat around each vertex. Then this tiling, I love this tiling in the hyperbolic plane. I decided to do a different approach. The balloon number, a little term in computational linguistics, for this would be 1. If you had an infinitely long balloon, you can make a set of 1 balloon. So that method wasn't going to work for me for actually physically making it, because I don't have an infinite balloon. So instead, each balloon is, this red is the same color. Anyway, each balloon is one of these lines. So you have all these lovely parallel lines that really demonstrate, like, the whole problem of parallel lines in the hyperbolic plane. Great. So here this is, I made each set a different color, like the 5 around here are the dark blue, and then I guess I moved to purple for the next kind of layer to make it symmetric and get this nice color pattern moving up to yellow towards the edge. And it kind of turns into a mess because the hyperbolic plane is messy, but it's hyperbolic messy. And making this, physically making it for me, really gave me a lot more intuition for the hyperbolic plane, a lot more understanding of how it works, because I have to figure out where I'm going to twist the balloons together. So the construction process was really helpful to me. Here's another one. For this one, I wanted something with those kind of tiles of edges that would fit together nicely. So I looked at some different regular tilings, and I found this one where you can kind of see how I have these kind of flower-shaped tiles, and they all work very nicely together. Even though this is technically could be made out of one infinitely long balloon, I divided it into these little tiles, and I'm interested in finding other good ways to tile the hyperbolic plane with edges, so I can make them from balloons. And one thing I did look at was snub hyperbolic tilings, which if you look at these shapes for each one of those, that's how you can tile it. And efficiently also for these. Like that's the right number of sections to twist the balloon into. You're not going to get any more than that and still have it work out nicely. This is using those tiles, except it also works for snub polyhedra and any snub planar tiling. So this was a workshop I did at Gathering for Gardner where we made a big snub dodecahedron. And the snub tetrahedron works too, which is the icosahedron, which happens to be a good, efficient way to make the icosahedron out of balloons. The hyperbolic, there's a paraboloid. Hyperboloid, right, I'm going to talk about hyperbolic paraboloids also. But that's a hyperboloid. Okay, yeah, the problem with balloons is that they do this. So I wanted to fix that problem, but I hadn't kind of seen connection between balloons and beadwork. So I started making stuff out of beads. This is a hyperbolic plane, the tiling of pentagons, but 4 around each vertex. It's kind of fun to play with, to fiddle with. Then I wanted to make one though that you could see the structure a little more instead of it, this looks kind of like a mess, I wanted something more hyperbolic feeling. So this one has like bigger open spaces with the heptagons. So I made that. And it's also fun to play with. You can kind of fiddle around with that. In fact, it's been so fun to fiddle with that I accidentally destroyed it. Anyway, but I had instructions to make this. This is kind of the pattern of beads I used, where you can see the 7 around. Where if it was 6 around, you just get a flat beadwork plane. But 7 is nice and hyperbolic. That's step 2. It's really easy. You can do it. It's on my website. Then I wanted to make the same thing, but with a color pattern. I have this in my pocket. Here it is. It's kind of fun, bigger plastic beads. You can come see these later. What pictures of that? Right. Then I thought, I want giant beads. I need a cheap way to make a lot of really big beads. So I ended up cutting water bottles and sticking them together to get a symmetric bead, taking the caps off. Right, I made a whole lot of those. I had to work on solids first, right? It's kind of like, you can't not make it would be wrong to not do this first, right? That's just for scale. And then I made a hyperbolic plane. 7 triangles around each point. You can kind of flop it around in all different ways. It's very big and sculptural, so that was fun. Then I wanted to draw it too, because making it physically and constructing it, you're guaranteed to get the hyperbolic plane if you do some sort of tiling or something. But I had to test my intuition by trying to draw it and see, could I draw something that really was hyperbolic? Am I visualizing it right now? That I made all these physical models. I feel like my intuition is getting better. And then someone said that, a friend said to me that this reminded them of the dried apple slice. And I said, wait, wow, that's great. He's not a mathematician, and he thought he was just making some throwaway comment. I said, no, actually, that's brilliant. Because dried fruit slices and vegetable slices, they really are hyperbolic. I started Google imaging, and like, wow, how come no one has really noticed this before? People have noticed that a Pringle is kind of hyperbolic shaped. Why haven't they noticed that, a Pringle is basically just a version of a chip, which is just like a dried slice of a potato, right? So why does no one really notice this? And it's because people are not used to these wild hyperbolic planes that really move and are free, and the different forms the hyperbolic plane can really take when squished into Euclidean space. So that's a problem. So that's why I think it's so important to do a lot of these visualizations to kind of understand what something really is, because we don't even know it when we see it. But here it is, now that I pointed out to you, that's just so obviously hyperbolic, right? Here's another one, just in a different form. And I want to do some tests. Why does it do this? What transformation is taking place is turning a Euclidean slice of fruit into a hyperbolic slice of fruit? One person had a theory that it was because of the skin on the edge. So I'll have to go faster. So I tried it without the skin. Obviously, it's still very beautiful and hyperbolic. So that's another thing I've been experimenting with. And vertical slices of apples still do this, so it's nothing to do with some weird cell structure that radiates the other way. Here's another drawing I did. The same friend said that this looked more like a piece of dried human skin, which I did not follow up on. And then I wanted to know, how do they fold, how do they move, so that you can get surfaces like Schwarz's p-surface by rolling up the hyperbolic plane on itself. So I want to visualize that. Here's another, just rolling up, and if you can imagine kind of continuing this pattern, you would get a lovely surface that's made out of the hyperbolic plane. What if spiders made hyperbolic planes? There would be a different web algorithm that would get this. I don't know how good it would be for catching bugs. I wanted to experiment with kind of different feel, start doing representational work using the hyperbolic plane. So this I kind of saw as a ghost, like a woman with a trailing dress, hyperbolic ghost. And I wanted to kind of make that, so I thought what would be a good material. I used plastic bags. I cut 7 gons out of them. I ironed them together, which was not as easy as I thought it would be. But still, I ended up with this. I just belted it around myself and tried to take a picture to kind of recreate this hyperbolic ghost. So that's that. Here's another view of it, just in the wind, how it moves. I want to do this in a nice sheer fabric, but I haven't yet. Right. Then there's this other problem. This is a hyperbolic paraboloid made out of paper. It was a model which for a long time we didn't know if it exists. Like, if this was ideal paper, could you make this? Or is the paper somehow bending or stretching or having subtle creases we don't think we're putting in there? So we worked on this and found that the answer is actually no. You can't make this. And in doing all of this kind of computational origami research and thinking about origami mathematically and how you can fold paper, here's some other versions of kind of hyperbolic paper folding. I began to think, well, what about the hyperbolic plane? How can you fold that? Because it has some different rules than Euclidean paper. There's different things you can do. And one thing you can do is that you can fold it 2 different ways. In Euclidean paper, you can't, if you make a crease going one way, and then 90 degrees you make a crease going the other way. You can't have both of those creases folded at the same time, but in hyperbolic planes, you can. So that's what I wanted to visualize here, and also wanting to make it more artistic and representational. I think that they look kind of like birds. So that's the painting I have in the art gallery, and thank you.